Hello, everybody. Welcome in to the latest edition of Believe in Steelers. Jarrett Bailey here with you as always, and we are presented by FanDuel. Appreciate everybody for making the show part of your day, morning, night, however you're listening or watching. Appreciate you for being here. If you are watching on the Believe YouTube channel, please be sure to subscribe. And if you're listening as a podcast, please be sure to leave a review and comment. Today, the Pittsburgh Steelers continue their search for another receiver and a potential name at the top of that list, Odell Beckham Jr. We'll talk about that, potential other names that are still in the mix, and maybe some guys out of left field that could be thrown in that people may not expect. So let's start with Odell, though, because that kind of felt like it came out of nowhere on Wednesday, where he was on a podcast with Bill Maher, and he had taken to social media to say that he had no plans to retire. And then the podcast with Bill Maher came out. And during the podcast, Bill Maher flat out asked him, "Why don't you join the Steelers?" And Beckham said, "I won't say that it's not a possibility, and I won't say that I haven't had any communication." And Odell Beckham and Aaron Rodgers are good friends. And Odell said about Aaron, "I love him, and we've had conversations." So he's hinting that there's been some sort of communication between him and Pittsburgh, and hinted that there's been conversations going on between he and Aaron Rodgers about a potential team up in Pittsburgh with the Steelers. And my thoughts on Odell Beckham potentially joining the Steelers are, I wouldn't do it personally. It's nothing against Odell Beckham, but at this stage in his career, like, he doesn't really have that much left to give. He was with the Dolphins last year. He only caught 9 passes in 9 games. Before that, with Baltimore, didn't really have like that great of a year in 2023. So I think Odell Beckham is a lot more of name value than on-field value at this point in his career. Very often injured as well. So again, nothing against Odell Beckham, but I just wouldn't see what the purpose of him, or what the purpose of the Steelers would have in signing him. I don't think that there's a lot of value there. It wouldn't cost them anything, sure. So you could look at it from the lens of it's a dart throw that's basically free. It's not going to cost them anything. So whoever they do bring in, they're going to go bargain bin hunting anyway, whether it's Odell Beckham or whether it's another name like Amari Cooper. It's going to be a cheap veteran signing if they do bring in anybody via free agency. So, but I wouldn't have it be Odell Beckham. And again, that's nothing against him, but at this point in his career, I just don't know what else he has to give. He had a great start to his career with the Giants. His first 3 years were as good as the first 3 years of any receiver in NFL history, legitimately. And injuries prevented him from having a greater career. And then, going to Cleveland, and that didn't work out. But when he got released by Cleveland and went to the Rams, I mean, he was an instrumental part of them winning the Super Bowl that year. He caught a touchdown pass in the Super Bowl, did get hurt in that game, which caused him not to play in 2022. But he certainly had good moments in his career. So, hat tip to him for that. But I personally wouldn't have much interest in seeing him in Pittsburgh. If this was 2016, yeah, absolutely. Sign me up for Aaron Rodgers and Odell Beckham and Jalen Ramsey. So I wouldn't bring in Odell Beckham. If given the choice of him or Amari Cooper, I would go Amari Cooper. I think that Amari Cooper gives you a little bit more at this stage in his career. Still available. He's not going to be very expensive. So I think that would be a name that would make more sense. Mark Caboli hinted at potential other names. Amari Cooper was one of them. Tyreek Hill was another name where I can't remember the exact word. I'm very much paraphrasing, but somebody said, "Oh, what about Tyreek Hill?" And he said, "Oh, you're getting closer." So look, I don't know what all Cabali's hearing or anything like that. I'm not going to, pretend to, to know who he speaks to or anything of that nature. But I can say absolutely no thank you to Tyreek Hill. For as fast as he is, and for what explosive plays could come, I'm good. There's enough potential distractions. I don't want the Steelers to bring in a surefire distraction who's also just not a good person. You can do your own Googling on the things that Tyreek Hill has done and been accused of. I'm good. I don't want any of that in Pittsburgh. And if I know Mike Tomlin, neither does he. I understand, the whole all-in thing and whatnot, but I would think the Steelers don't want any part of that either. But, I'm not going to pretend to know what Omar Khan or Mike Tomlin are thinking. If they are able to get Tyreek Hill for somewhat cheap, then maybe they pull the trigger and really just say, hey, DK Metcalf, Tyreek Hill, those are our receivers. There you go. And look, for me saying, I don't want any part of Tyreek Hill because he's not a great guy and a potential distraction. If the trade were to happen, the football fan in me would be like, all right, if it works, then this could be very fun from a pure football perspective. They brought in Cam Sutton last year and he was accused of domestic violence. So, there's a lot of things that happen in football with these players where, it's, you're almost forced to separate art from artist a little bit, which, some people do and some people don't. And whatever you do, that's your business. He wouldn't be my choice to come in simply because of that aspect of things. And it just wouldn't be a guy that I want to root for, if that makes sense. Other people are floating Terry McLaurin. I really don't think that's going to happen, guys. I really don't. I do think that Washington is smart enough now. Now, if it was Dan Snyder, then maybe. But I do think the new ownership group with Josh Harris and general manager Adam Peters are smart enough to know, all right, this is a guy who's been here for a long time, just had a career year last year, 13 touchdown catches. We have a quarterback on a rookie deal. We're not going to be very expensive at quarterback for a while. We should take advantage of this. We've already tried taking advantage of it by bringing in Laramie Tunsil and Deebo Samuel. Marshawn Lattimore, hopefully completely healthy, will certainly help them. They bring in Von Miller as well. Like, it wouldn't make sense for Pittsburgh, for Washington, similar to how it wouldn't have made sense for Pittsburgh to trade TJ Watt when everybody was suggesting that happens. It wouldn't make sense for Washington to trade Terry McLaurin with all the other moves that they've made this offseason. So I don't think Terry McLaurin, I don't think that's going to happen personally. I could be wrong. But if I had to bank on yes or no, is Terry McLaurin going to get traded? I would put a lot of money on no. But yeah, time will tell. We'll be right back after this word from ZipRecruiter. This episode of Believe in Steelers is brought to you by ZipRecruiter. Finding great candidates to hire can be very difficult. You get too many resumes and not enough candidates with the right skills or experience. But not with ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter finds amazing candidates for you and fast. And right now you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/audio. ZipRecruiter's smart technology identifies top talent for your roles quickly. Immediately after you post your job, ZipRecruiter's powerful matching technology starts finding candidates that are qualified for your job right away. Ditch the other hiring sites and let ZipRecruiter find what you're looking for, that needle in the haystack. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Try it for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/audio. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/audio. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. All right. Welcome back to Believe in Steelers, brought to you by FanDuel. you can head over to FanDuel, excuse me, and bet on the Steelers 10 plus wins, by the way, sitting right now at plus 170 over at FanDuel. So head over and make that bet right now if you're feeling really confident in what the Steelers are going to be doing this year. Other teams at 10 plus wins. I mean, I'm pretty confident in what the New England Patriots are doing this year. They're at plus 190. So head over to FanDuel. Other receivers that Pittsburgh could target. I would have said Courtland Sutton before he signed an extension with Denver. I didn't think that was going to happen. I was pretty adamant that I didn't think that was going to happen. Last year, Courtland Sutton didn't show up for mandatory minicamp because he won a new deal. He didn't get it. I was surprised that they paid him. Very happy for him. And the Steelers last year, both before and during the NFL draft, tried to trade for Courtland Sutton. Sources told me that ahead of the draft and during, that Pittsburgh, as well as the Los Angeles Rams, were two teams that were very strongly pursuing Courtland Sutton. The Broncos said no both times. So obviously he stayed in Denver and had a really nice year. So that would have been a name I would have circled. Maybe Chris Olave. Obviously the concussion stuff scares you a little bit. The Steelers reportedly reached out earlier this offseason about Chris Olave, but were shut down pretty quick. And if you're the Saints, like, I get it. You want to see if you have anything with guys like Tyler Shuck, Spencer Rattler. But from an outside perspective, holding on to Chris Olave just doesn't make a lot of sense because there's nothing really on that roster. That's not going to be a team that's competing for anything outside of the number one overall pick this year. So I could see if the Steelers don't make some sort of move ahead of week one, where if the Saints are 0-7, 0-8 at the trade deadline, then maybe they trade Chris Olave for a third round pick or a 3 and a 5, something like that, to get as much draft capital as they can. And if they try to get a quarterback again, which, not for nothing, Garrett Nussmeier, his dad, is on the Saints coaching staff. So if he balls out and is in that conversation for being a top 10 pick, LSU guy, local to the area, dad's on the Saints coaching staff. I mean, some things kind of just write themselves. So maybe the Saints would want to have as much draft capital in their pocket as humanly possible at that point to make a move for Garrett Nussmeier if he does have a very, very good year. The Packers receivers have been names that everybody circled, but a lot of them are hurt. And even the ones that are healthy haven't been able to catch. Go back and watch the first preseason game that the Packers had against the Jets. Everybody outside of Matthew Golden couldn't catch anything that Jordan Love threw to them that hit them directly in the hands. So, if you're thinking about Jaden Reed or Romeo Doubs or somebody else, a lot of these guys are either A, injured, or B, just not looking good right now. That said, they're not going to hold on to all of these guys. So maybe the Steelers just wait till the end of preseason, wait till cut week and get something done there. But I don't know if a trade will happen. They're dealing with a lot of injuries right now. So that's something that I think would have to wait until the end of the preseason. And a move that the Steelers make anyway might not come until the end of the preseason. So we could be waiting that long regardless. I'm scrolling through the teams right now. I just don't see, maybe Indy, but that's, again, something that doesn't feel like it'll happen until the trade deadline, where they're going to try this thing with Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. And, if they're sitting there at the trade deadline and they're, 4-4, 5-3, then yeah, they'll probably hold on to their guys. But if they're 2-6 and they know, all right, none of these guys are our future, we'll ship away, Alec Pierce, who's a really good deep threat. Josh Downs, a good slot guy. They could do something like that. But again, that's something that probably wouldn't happen until the deadline. We keep looking down. Seattle doesn't really have anybody. Obviously they just got DK Metcalf from Seattle. The Cardinals, not a lot there. Lord knows Houston doesn't really have much right now. So, the options here are pretty few and far between when it comes to potential acquisitions. And it's going to end up being a guy that could be surprisingly cut. I'll give you a name that you might want to watch out for. I don't think it's a guarantee that Curtis Samuel makes the Bills' 53-man roster. I think they really like what they have in Tyrell Shavers, who's been a guy that's been on the fringe of making the 53-man roster over the past couple years. He's been having a good camp, and he had a big first preseason game against the Bears. I believe that's who they played. No, it was not the Bears. Who was it? The Giants, excuse me. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Curtis Samuel makes the roster for the Bills because they like a guy like Tyrell Shavers, who had a really nice preseason opener against the Giants. And for how much they paid him when they signed him last year, I mean, he hasn't been on the field nearly as much as you would like throughout his career. And for the production that they got for him, it does not add up to the money. So when you look at what Buffalo currently has there, Keon Coleman, Elijah Moore, Josh Palmer, Khalil Shakir, obviously. And then a guy like Tyrell Shavers, I think that there's a possibility that they cut their losses with Curtis Samuel and, try something with one of these fringe receivers. Laviska Shenault's also competing for a roster spot. KJ Hamler's there, former second-round pick. So there's a lot of different guys that are there that are competing for spots. And Curtis Samuel's been dealing with an injury as well in training camp. So if you're the Steelers, you don't want to trade for that. But if he becomes a free agent and the health checks out, you could probably sign him to a cheap deal and, see what happens. So that's a name that you can maybe watch out for. But in terms of like the big ones, don't think it's going to be Terry McLaurin. I think he's staying in Washington. They'll get a deal done. Amari Cooper would make sense. And in terms of Odell Beckham, I personally wouldn't do it. And it's not that Odell's a bad guy or anything like that, but, there's some diva tendencies there that go, back to his days in New York. And with a team like this right now, I mean, the last thing that you want is something to go awry and have a locker room full of big personalities that could really turn this thing on its head. However, for as many qualms as I've had with Mike Tomlin in recent history, if there's a guy that can handle all of it, it is him. So maybe something happens there. I'm not going to hold my breath in terms of thinking that Odell Beckham will turn into 2016 Odell Beckham if it does. Nor am I holding my breath hoping that a Tyreek Hill trade happens. And I don't think that it will. That's just pure speculation. I don't have anybody in the building telling me things that are going to happen or that they think are going to happen. It's nothing like that. But if anybody's going to trade for Tyreek Hill, I think it'll be like Baltimore, who are just going to, just trying to build as good a roster as they can before they give Lamar Jackson another extension and try to chase the Super Bowl. That's just my thoughts on it. The Steelers will host the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Saturday in their second preseason game. It'll be their one and only home preseason game. They'll close in Carolina against the Panthers next week. And we'll start to see these final roster cuts be made. And then get ready for week 1 in New York. So let me know what you guys think, though. If you leave a review for the podcast, let me know who you want to see the Steelers sign or trade for. If there's a name that we didn't go over today, let me know. Whether it be as a podcast review or in the YouTube comments on the Believe YouTube channel. Appreciate everybody for tuning in, as always. And we'll see you next time on Believe in Steelers. Take care till then.